Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Join us every weekday at this time to discuss news, spend time in the Word, and receive answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, good morning, Kathy. This will be airing Monday, May the 1st. This will be our first day of May, which
good
is
morning. Happy
Monday.
May.
Happy May, everybody, and I hope the spring's been fun and heading towards summer. And the weather in Colorado, we have snowstorms in March, April, into May somewhat. Some of them can be actually pretty heavy. Just because they get
your ski slopes are staying open a long time this year, right? Haven't they already projected through June or something?
Usually, well, they do. They usually end April 15th.
Right. Except A Basin, which has always stayed open.
A Basin is, we're going to try to stay open. Even if we got a sliver of snow, we're going to stay open.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And then they're the first ones to open, by the way. So their season, when they don't ski, is really at the most maybe 2 to 3 months max.
Wow.
So they stay open as long. And of course, it's weak skiing, when it gets really hot. But this year, we've had so much snow in the mountains, which is actually good for the water table, is that all the slopes are staying into May and some even deeper into May because they've got such a high base that, it'll start melting, but they're still, and by the way, up there, they still will get snow into May. And so it's going to be it's always interesting in Colorado
that's good for the economy up there, right?
really, really good. And it's been beautiful skiing this year, by the way. So it's fun. Linda went and she had a good time, and I really had a good time. We were in Snowmass not too long ago. It's near Aspen, and it's a great family spot, and it's got beautiful slopes. One of the best in the world, actually. And we were staying at a place right on the slope.
Nice.
So I could get up and get out there right when the lifts open. And because of Snowmass, because it's kind of family oriented, they groom it a lot, like probably 70% is groomed. And of course they still have moguls and stuff in other places, or really steep places, but they every night they groom it.
Right.
So it's just perfectly smooth, and the snow is perfect. And so if I'm first up, I can get up there on the top, and
that's great.
And you can just and because if you've learned how to ski really well, in a sense, you're a good skier if you're relaxed, and you don't have that. Usually, if you're not, what happens is your upper thigh tenses up, and it starts to burn a little bit. But if you're relaxed, it doesn't. Well, I've got to that point, particularly when it's groomed like that. So I could just go down on these fantastic slopes, 105-inch base.
Nice.
And I could do in an hour and a half to 2 hours. I could do 8 to 9 runs.
Wow.
And it was in 2 hours, people are still coming out to the slope. It's still you're still places that are groomed, so you can experience that the whole time. And then that's good. I'm going in because I get passes, and passes are. I had a good time. And I don't need to stay and get my money's worth I can quit, And by the way, in one afternoon, I was out till lunch and it got really windy. And it's like, I'm not going to do that.
With the pass, you don't mind. You can choose your weather, right?
Yeah. So we had a good time in Colorado skiing, and Linda had a good time too. And she got hurt a couple years ago and was kind of hesitant to try it, but she said, I'm going to try it, and she did, and she did good. She did really good.
Oh, good.
So we've been talking about prayer, and this is out of Colossians chapter 1, where Paul is praying, and we've spent a lot of time. This prayer is so packed with truth that we're taking our time. We're into it for lots of sessions here, but he says that, praying that you're filled with the knowledge of his will, that you have a heart to seek him and get wisdom and understanding. You walk worthy of him, fully pleasing him, means you're hearing his voice, letting him take you to faith, you're believing it and stepping forward. And then you're fruitful in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God, so that there is a result. So Paul doesn't say, well, you just know his will, but you actually experience his will, which will be fruitful. Why? Well, because abiding in the vine says the result is you're going to bear fruit. And the fruit, again, is personal transformation into the nature and character of God, and then circumstances changing, that God delivers covenant stuff in real life. He said you'll experience that fruit, and then you'll increase in the experience of the life of God, which is now in you, that he wants you to fully receive, and you'll just experience it more and more and more and more and more. So he gets to this place, and then in verse 11, he goes further with this. So go ahead and read verses 11 through 18.
Sure. Strengthened with all might, according to his glorious power, for all patience and long-suffering with joy, giving thanks to the Father who has qualified us to be partakers of the inheritance of the saints in the light. He has delivered us from the power of darkness and conveyed us into the kingdom of the Son of his love, in whom we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins. Okay. He is the image of the invisible God.
Yeah, that's good. Right.
Keep going?
No, that's good. Oh, yeah, sorry. Go ahead, go all the way through 18, then we'll pick this up. Yep, sorry.
Yep. For he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things consist. And he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he may have preeminence.
Okay. So when we read 11 through 14, he kind of puts all of this together into some truths that have then the result of something wonderful. So let's actually go to 13 and 14.
Okay.
Which is a basic truth that then has impact from 11 and 12. But it says that he has done what for us in verse 13?
He has delivered us from the power of darkness and conveyed us into the kingdom.
Okay, so he says, because of my life, and I'm delivered you from the kingdom of darkness, which we've learned something about that, is what? That's the world.
Right.
It's a dark place. It's trouble. It's kill, steal, and destroy. It's under the control of the enemy. Well, I've taken you, and he says, now this is important, and it's something we need to understand it. He didn't say, I've taken you out of that place. That's kind of what we would like.
Right, right.
Is that, well, just take care of all that. I don't want to be there. He says no.
Yeah, instead he says, I delivered you from the power of that place.
Okay, so what's the significance of that?
Well, that is very different than, like you said, removing us from the place, delivering us from the power. It no longer has authority over us because we're walking in the kingdom.
Okay, he says so and we'll put these things together. He says, I'm not changing the darkness, and I'm not taking you out of the darkness. I'm delivering you from the power of that.
Right.
And the way I did it and are doing it is I convey you into what?
Into the kingdom, into his kingdom.
Into the kingdom of the Son of his love. So that he says, I'm taking you from the power of darkness into the place where I'm at, the kingdom.
Right.
Because in order to not have the power of darkness operate, you must be where?
In the kingdom.
Well, you got to be in the kingdom.
With him.
So he says, I did that in verse 14 through what?
Through Jesus's blood and the forgiveness of sins.
Through the work that I did on the cross,
Mm-hmm.
I took away the requirement that you got to be perfect. I forgave you at the cross, which is now the privilege and the opportunity for you to come into my kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do with what you do or could do or might do.
Right.
It's strictly that I did it on my own nature, my own love. That's the basis upon which you can come in.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, it's universal and it's available to everybody. And you can go from the power of darkness into the love and the joy and the power of the kingdom, which, by the way, takes you out of the power of darkness.
Right.
Okay, now we know something about that. He said, I set it up and I did it.
Mm-hmm.
However, what now is required by you to stay there?
You have to stay with me.
How?
And it's your choice.
Based on
abiding with him and seeking his voice and staying with him and following.
So that to be in my kingdom, it's really simple. I'm the king and you're not.
Right.
And to cross over that line, you have to surrender your will to my will, which, by the way, is why Paul spent so much energy saying, I'm praying that you have a heart to follow God's will. He said, now understand something, because he's trying to build all this truth together. He says, his will is only fulfilled in the kingdom. And you got to understand something is you don't have to fight an enemy there because he doesn't have any power over you.
Right.
Stay in the power of God, because that's where the kingdom is, and you have to choose it. And so if you think about it, God says, I brought you here. But he says to most believers, you keep walking away. You go back to the world, and when you're not in the world and in my kingdom, you have the power of darkness ruling over you. And that's the truth, see? And that should explain a lot to you. Why you struggle so much and why you have so much trouble is you keep walking back to the power of darkness when you don't have to. But I can't deliver it to you until you be in my kingdom, which I've given you the privilege of doing. And by the way, all you got to do is what? I cleared the way. Just come on over. That's it. He says, okay. He says, now, because of that, I've qualified you in verse 12 to be what?
To be partakers of the inheritance of the saints in the light.
Okay, so he says the kingdom, and this is why we got to put all this together. Remember, in the Greek, and particularly the way it was written, the entire book of Colossians is one long sentence, and all these things come together. So we tend to read it always sequentially. And he says, well, back up a step and kind of look at all that I'm trying to say here and let me put it together for you. And that's why he says you got to go from darkness to light into the kingdom. When you do, you've now qualified to be a partaker of the inheritance of the saints in the light. Okay, now there's two cool things about that. Number one, on what basis am I qualified?
On his, that's all on the cross.
It's that the only basis is you accept, receive, and live with what I did and do.
Right.
And all you got to do is come on over. That gives you qualification. That's it.
Right.
It doesn't say if.
Yeah.
It says stay in the kingdom and you're qualified.
Right.
And then he says the inheritance is in the light. Okay, where's the light?
Not in the darkness. That's in the kingdom.
It's in the kingdom. He says, okay, so, and that's why he puts it together. He says the light, which we've talked before, is seeking truth, staying in truth, pursuing truth, letting him reveal things to you. It's in the kingdom. So he says, you're qualified to come. In that place, the light, the kingdom, he says, you will partake of the inheritance of the saints. Okay, so a couple things. Is it only unique to me personally?
No.
No. Anybody that has a heart to go, all are partakers of the inheritance.
Right.
And by the way, I have an inheritance for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And you will experience, the best place you'll experience is to have other saints in that place with you. And we've talked about the sweetness of inner circle and small group.
Right, and community.
He says, why? Well, because you're all experiencing the inheritance.
Mm-hmm.
What's the inheritance? I've come to give you life and give it to you what?
Abundantly.
And you inherit it. And this is really cool. Inheritance happens when, in our physical life, when do you get an inheritance?
When somebody has to die, actually.
When you die. Then somebody died, and I get their stuff.
Right.
He said, okay, two things. He said, in order for you to receive it, I died. And now it's all available to you. By the way, and we talked about this before, the role of the Holy Spirit is to convey all of that stuff to you.
Right.
That's his job. And because I died, he says, now, this is cool. When do you inherit what I have to offer you? What must happen for you? You have to do what?
Have to
die to self.
Yeah, die to self. Yeah.
You have to die, and that's why Paul goes into Romans and says, you put to death the flesh by what? Denying self, take up the cross, follow him. And I've said, I surrender my will to yours, God, and now I die to self, which then allows me to partake of the inheritance. Where? In the light, in the kingdom.
Right.
And by the way, there's no darkness there, and there's no power of darkness there. By the way, are you still in the world? Yes.
Yes.
So it's not I pull you out of it. It's that there's no power over you. I'm going to deliver to you the superabundant life, and you just have to understand that you're going to have to be with me in the kingdom, and that's where it all happens. And then you're a partaker of the fullness of all. And by the way, Paul writes the rest of Colossians and explains that fullness. Is I'm going to tell you what that looks like, and it's wonderful, it's fantastic, it's over the top, spectacular. And he says, so let's go back to what I've been praying is, one, you just have a heart to seek his will. And I'll deliver it to you with all wisdom and understanding. I pray that you're worthy of the process. Okay, now he just basically told us, ultimately, what does that mean? If I'm walking by faith, which you properly helped us understand, without faith it's impossible to please him. Therefore, faith is what pleases him. He says, I'm the author and finisher of faith. You got to hear my voice. You got to let me take you to believing it. I got to have you partake of it, experience it.
Once I speak it, I'll walk you to believing it. Stay with me.
And he says, so, hey, children, where does that all occur? Where is all that
in
occur?
the kingdom.
In the kingdom. Because there's no power of darkness. You don't need to worry about that. Are you going to experience it? Yep. Is the enemy coming after you? Yep. And by the way, the enemy comes after you tries to tempt you to do what? Get out of the kingdom. Nope, stay with me. Do you have trouble? Yep. Do you have adversity? Yep. Do you have complications? Yep. I will have you partake of my answers. And all you got to do is stay with me and live out the life of the kingdom. And the privilege of it is just what I did. That's it. All you got to do is come. And so all of this is available to you. And the word partake is a very strong word, because it's not that you learn or intellectually say, yeah, that's nice.
But you actually are participating.
You're participating. You are operating. You're experiencing the reality of that. You're joining the partaking of it. You're having it. So
beautiful.
like, and the word that we tend to do is, I went out to dinner. Well, did you partake in the actual eating of the food?
Right.
Well, okay, your answer can be yes. When what's the answer? When can you say yes?
After you've actually eaten the food.
You actually did it. Man, I went to this great party and they had this great food, but I never partaked because I just looked at it. But I never ate it. Well, that means you didn't partake of it. You got to see it. You got to say, isn't that cool? But you never actually
But you didn't fully experience it.
You didn't experience it because you didn't partake of it. And that's why that word is so strong, is that I'm praying that you get His will. I'm praying that you're worthy by coming and seeking and living by faith, which means you got to hear His voice. That I want you to understand this really has not a lot to do with you. It has to do just with me. And the only requirement is you got to be in the kingdom. And how do you do that? Surrender your will. Let me be the king. And then you'll partake
Stay with
of
me.
it. Okay, now this is cool, and this is why our ministry has grown so much. If I talked about that, and somebody said to me, "Have you experienced the inheritance?"
Right.
And I said, "Well, no. My life is still crummy. My life is still difficult. My life is still problematic. But hey, you're a sinner. We're going to partake when we get to heaven. But no, I haven't.
Right.
I'm telling you about it, but I haven't." What would be their response?
They honestly wouldn't be that interested.
Yeah. So,
No.
well, you're telling me about it, but I want to know, have you partaken of it?
Right. Does it really work? Does it live up to what you're saying?
Yeah. And the reason, see, when we bring people to a retreats, we have our leaders, because they partake, really, they bear witness to the inheritance.
Right.
And people say, which is how it grows. This is how it happens. So somebody comes, they experience it just even briefly, and then they start to abide, and it really happens for them. People around them say, I've noticed that you're experiencing something different in life.
Something's different, yeah.
I've partaken. Is that possible for me?
Right.
Well, what we don't say is, well, come and learn about it, and, and good luck. It's no, yes, we have partaken. Can you? Yes. There's a key to that. Got to be in the kingdom. And I got to show you what that looks like. And that means I have to be pleasing to Him. Think about how cool this is. You have to abide. If you abide, you will hear His voice. You will understand. You will believe it. You'll walk by faith into it. And you'll stay in the kingdom and partake of it. And you'll recognize something. It's better to be there than not.
Right.
And when you recognize that, you say, you know what? And by the way, it's a learning process.
Absolutely.
Because we tend to walk back out. He says, well, do you see it's better over here? Yep. Okay, come on back. I'm going to stay there, stay there, stay there. And that's why Paul says in Romans, you're not obligated to walk back out. You actually, if you're led by the Spirit, you're normally going to be there.
Right.
And when you start to learn that, and you learn it by saying, yeah, you know what, it's better to be there than not. I'll stay there. I'll partake. I learn to seek His will. I hear His voice. I learn to live by faith. And then other people are going to say, is that possible for me? Yep. There's something important. You have to partake. Where? You got to be in the kingdom. And the questions are simple. How do I do that?
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. There's no system to it. I got to show you how to walk with Him, abide, get connected, stay connected, hear His voice, And I know something. If you have a heart to do it, God will do it.
Absolutely.
That's it. And that's
and
why
we've seen it time and time and time again.
That's why I can absolutely 100% say, if you just have a heart to do it, God will teach you that 100%, and you'll learn to partake, and you will then be an example of the covenant. You're being blessed to be, and you will automatically give it away, not by a program, but because people are going to be interested. And that's how it goes. So it's this prayer is so powerful when he puts all that together to say, it's this, and this, but ultimately it's stay in the kingdom. I've given you the privilege to be in the kingdom, and when you're in the kingdom, you will partake of the inheritance, which is the superabundant life that I'm giving to you now, which, by the way, continues into eternity.
Yes.
Which is really cool. So we'll pick this up.
And this is why we love to give it away, right?
Yeah, we do. And there's nothing greater. So we'll pick it up again tomorrow and continue with this next thought of, because then he goes on to make a statement about Christ and his word that's remarkable. And it reinforces, hey, by the way, the reason you can be assured of this is because of what he's going to explain to us next. So that'll be fun to hit tomorrow.
Looking forward to it. Well, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. If you have questions, send them in at questions@afjministry.com, or click the link on the podcast and send your questions in that way.
Yep. We
have a great afternoon.
Yep. See you soon.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.